To watch more videos, please subscribe Wosm Entertainment and ring the bell for the notification.
Thank you. Woo! That's awesome. Hello, BC New Democrats. How you feeling? All right. Well, thank you very much for that incredibly warm welcome. It's an honor. Bonjour, chers amis. I'd like to begin with a traditional acknowledgement of the lands on which we're gathered. I would like to begin by acknowledging the Lekwungen speaking people on whose unceded lands we gather, and the Songhees, the Esquimalt, and the Mosaic peoples whose historical relationship with the land continues today. Thank you. C'est un plaisir et un honneur pour moi d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. And I'm also incredibly honored to be joined by some of my BC caucus today, which is awesome. Let's give them another round of applause. An incredible BC team. So before I go any further, I know it's been said before, but I feel like I have to say it and I kind of want to say it. After 16 very long years, it is simply wonderful to have beautiful BC represented by a new democratic government and a new democratic premier. It is wonderful. It's amazing. Thank you. And we all know that these types of incredible victories and changes in government are not possible without the incredible hard work of so many people. So I want to acknowledge all the organizers, all the volunteers, and yes, most of all the members in this room today for all your hard work in that phenomenal victory for us and changing the course of 16 years and bringing in a new democratic government. Thank you to all of you. Thank you. And it's also important to look at what we've been able to achieve. And just a couple of short months, 6 months, you've begun to build a comprehensive strategy to tackle poverty in British Columbia. You took the first steps to help lift families out of poverty by raising income assistance rates and assistance for people with disabilities. You can clap to these things. These are great things. I would be clapping to them if they were happening in my province. And this is an incredible one. This is really important. All these are very important, but this is particularly important, I think. You are working to reestablish a human rights commission that will build a safer and more equitable province. This is so important. You've committed to supporting the principles of the UN Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and have made that a foundational part of your policy agenda. You've introduced crucial campaign finance reform to take big money out of politics here in BC and bring it back to the people, to give power to the people. And you've taken action on housing affordability, which you know is a national crisis, by committing to build $500 million in modular housing and funding 1,700 new units for purpose-built rental and new funding for residential tenancy branch. Thank you for taking this issue seriously and committing to do something about it. And you've delivered on your promise to engage British Columbians in the electoral reform process and make sure that every vote counts in British Columbia. Thank you for taking that initiative on. This is a pretty good list for like 6 months, eh? It's not bad. I got one more too. And you've committed to raising corporate tax and income rates for high earners to make sure everyone pays their fair share. This is so fundamentally important. Thank you. Now, you've already done this a bunch of times, but I ask you once again to give a lot of love to our Premier Horgan, and the entire NDP team. Let's show them some love. Yes. Absolutely. You are all truly an inspiration, and thank you for showing us the way. We're still enjoying a bit of that post-election high after this provincial win, and I'm enjoying it myself. Though we didn't exactly enjoy that same type of high in our federal election, instead we faced a pretty significant setback, and many of us are still reeling from it. But despite that setback, I have to give a shout out to you, all the people that worked so hard to ensure that in the last federal election, we swept all but one seat on the island. That's phenomenal. That's worth celebrating. Yes, it is. For sure. That was awesome. And a shout out to the rest of the BC team for electing so many new Democrats from BC in general. Shout outs to all of them. As new leader, I want to thank you for sending so many new Democrats from BC to Ottawa. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for your hard work. So as you all know, at the federal level, we're in opposition. It wasn't too long ago you were there yourselves. And you know that when you're in opposition, parties get caught up in thinking that our primary purpose is to oppose. Now, in fairness, with the current government, there is certainly a lot that we need to oppose, and we will oppose it. We will oppose this government's approach to climate change. They made big promises, absolutely. They made big promises during the election to get elected, and they betrayed our trust and failed to address this key issue of our time. Just a few weeks ago, the Environmental Commissioner, the Commissioner for Environment and Sustainable Development, confirmed that this government has not implemented any strategy to fight climate change. Absolutely. The Liberals are so far behind tackling climate change that we won't meet our commitments under the Paris Accord. In fact, we won't meet our commitments that were set by Stephen Harper's targets. Our greenhouse gas emissions are targeted to continue to grow through this government's mandate, and that's something we definitely oppose. We oppose this government's infrastructure bank and its plans to line the pockets of wealthy investors while spending privatization and ensuring privatization of our public infrastructure. We oppose this. This is something that's fundamentally opposed to what we need to do. Absolutely. We oppose the government's abandonment of electoral reform. We do. And as New Democrats, we oppose the kind of politics where ministers don't think twice about using loopholes to get around ethics laws. We oppose that, and we'll be a strong voice in opposition for that. As New Democrats, we take opposing injustice and unfairness seriously because we understand the challenges that Canadians are facing. I can tell you on a personal note, growing up, with brown skin, long hair, and a funny-sounding name, I faced some of those challenges myself. I faced discrimination. I've been stopped by the police multiple times in my own community for no other reason than the color of my skin or the way I looked. I understand how it feels. It makes you feel like you don't belong, that there's something wrong with you for just being you. It makes you have less of a sense of self-worth. And that's why I'm committed to building a Canada where no one is stopped or discriminated because of the color of their skin. I commit to that. I commit to building a Canada where people enjoy justice, where people are not discriminated against. Their identity is not a barrier. But this isn't the only type of injustice people face because of their identity. The reality is, I've only glimpsed a small picture of the discrimination that far too many people in our country face. Having glimpsed this discrimination, I want you to know that I come from a lived experience. So whether it's issues of gender justice, including pay equity and ending violence against women, or LGBTQ2S issues and ending the blood ban and so many other discriminatory practices, or any other challenges we face as a society, I am committed to tackling all forms of discrimination in our country with the goal of building a society in a country where no one is left behind. But we all know that though it's definitely necessary to oppose, it isn't enough to just oppose. Beyond opposing, we need to propose. Beyond proposing, we need to inspire. We need to inspire with bold, progressive policies that will uplift the lives of all people in our beautiful country. And that's why New Democrats isn't just a question of protecting future generations. It's a question of protecting our environment today and now. That's why we're not only going to just oppose privatization of our public infrastructure, but we will campaign on building and expanding public ownership and public infrastructure that's owned by the people, that's controlled by the people, so that access and quality are the priorities, not profits and the bottom line. We need to own our public infrastructure. We need to defend it and protect it. It's our public infrastructure, and we will build on it. We will expand on it. We will ensure that we have a future that's bright, a future that is promiseful. Thank you. Getting a little overwhelmed today. I'm getting pumped up a bit. You get me pumped up too. It's good. Feel happy. And that's why, in addition to opposing, we propose a solution, and last week proposed a motion that calls on the government to close the ethic loopholes that their ministers are using to get around the Conflicts of Interest Act. But beyond just closing those loopholes, we want to go further and inspire Canadians with electoral reform that gives power to the people, that ensures that each and every vote counts in Ottawa. We're going to build on your commitment here at the provincial level here in BC and take proportional representation to the federal level to ensure that finally, once and for all, we can get rid of the fears of strategic voting. We can get rid of the fears of vote splitting and ensure that people are empowered to vote the way they want to vote without any fear. That's what we want to see happen. So while I was in university, my father became very ill. And both my parents were unable to work, and we still needed to pay the bills. So in my 20s, I became the sole income earner in my family. I also took in my younger brother, Jagmeet Singh. I became his surrogate parent. While in university, I made his meals, bought his clothes, sent him to school each day, and yes, I even attended parent-teacher interviews. And I think I confused a lot of parents about trying to figure out how he was my son and my age, and I'm sure that was very confusing to some people. We continued to this way for almost a decade until my father was thankfully back on his feet. We were so very lucky to find our way out of this precarious situation, but many people don't. Many people face far more difficult struggles. Again, I just caught a glimpse of the pressure people around us feel. The weight of living paycheck to paycheck, knowing the consequences of falling short, letting your family down, and losing the basics like shelter, food, and education. That's why it's unacceptable to me that our government tells people to just get used to precarious work, to unstable work. Maybe if you look at employment as a hobby, you can get used to unstable work. But if work means the difference between putting food on the table or a roof over the head of your family, then no. Job insecurity is unacceptable in our society. We don't accept that. As New Democrats, we will fight against it. We will protect people's jobs. We will work against precarious employment and ensure that there's a future where people can rely on a job. That's our commitment to you at the federal level. New Democrats know the struggles that people face. We get it. We are the party that hears the stories of the people of our country, their struggles, and works with people to propose a better way forward. We are the only ones with the courage to build a better future. Nous savons qu'il y a une soif au Canada pour un nouveau leadership, pour une nouvelle direction rassembleuse, pour bâtir un Canada inclusif où chacun peut réaliser ses rêves. Mais c'est possible seulement si nous gagnons. C'est pourquoi il est en notre devoir envers les Canadiens et Canadiennes de former le prochain gouvernement. My friends, Canadians deserve the type of government at the federal level that only New Democrats can deliver. We deserve a government that gets it and is willing to fight unfairness and oppose injustice. We deserve a government with a progressive vision that will make lives better. A vision for expanding and building on our universal health care to include pharmacare and dental care. Instead of cutting our health care, we need to expand it. We need to grow it and build it. A government with a vision for tearing down barriers to education and making investments so that all levels of education are accessible to all. And a vision for real reconciliation and a true nation-to-nation relationship with Canada's Indigenous peoples. And a vision that begins with a very basic step. Instead of taking Indigenous children to court and saying that Indigenous children don't deserve equal funding and contravening over 3 human rights tribunal orders at a starting point, a new democratic government would not be taking Indigenous children to court and said that they deserve at a starting point equal and equitable funding. That's a commitment that New Democrats have. That's the difference between us and the other governments. We are committed to true justice for Indigenous peoples, to true reconciliation. And a vision for a commitment to climate change that aggressively reduces emissions, builds the green economy of the future, and leaves no worker behind in the transition. And like you're doing here in BC, a vision for an electoral system that ensures the voices of Canadians are truly heard and fairly represented. That's right. But to get there, to form governments and implement progressive policies that will make lives better, we must again be the party that inspires Canadians, that makes their hearts beat faster, that encourages them to dream bigger. We must champion a politics of love to fight the politics of greed and division, a politics of courage to fight the politics of cynicism and fear. As I said to you earlier, and I continue to say, BC, you're leading the way. You're showing us the way. This week, our great MP, Don Davies, took me on a tour of an overdose prevention site, or a number of sites in his riding of Vancouver Kingsway and just a bit south of it. I've worked in criminal justice for a number of years, so I can tell you from personal experience, but I can also show you, and I'm sure you all know, that there's a preponderance of evidence. When we look at those folks that are being charged with personal possession of a controlled substance, people that are being arrested and incarcerated, these are folks that are struggling with issues of mental health, of addiction, and poverty. To me, poverty, mental health, and addictions don't sound like a criminal justice problem. They sound to me like a social justice problem that should be dealt with like a social justice problem. And that's why I'm calling for the decriminalization of all personal possession offenses when it comes to drugs, to make a difference in the lives of people and actually bring real change. If we want to address the national crisis, and it is a national crisis, our current policies aren't working. We need to put our resources towards harm reduction, towards rehabilitation, towards support services. We also need to make sure that instead of just calling or talking about this issue as a national crisis, we need to ensure that it's declared a public health emergency under the Emergency Act so that these overdose centers are brought within the legal framework and they get the funding and the support that they deserve and need. We have evidence that supports our position. We know that in the Portugal model, that they used to spend 80% of their resources on criminalization and 20% on rehabilitation. And the results were much like what we have. There was no decrease in the use of these harmful and dangerous drugs that are taking lives. And instead, when they switched the resources and put 80% of the resources towards rehabilitation and 20% towards the criminal justice system, guess what? The results were they actually achieved harm reduction. Less people were using. People were healthier. They got the outcomes that we want as well. So we need to make sure our policies align with our goals. While visiting the overdose prevention sites, just to underline how big of an issue this is, I saw with my own eyes the devastation of the opioid crisis that's gripping our country. I saw that people's lives are being destroyed while the federal government effectively does little or nothing, and it broke my heart. But on this trip, I also met, and I had the privilege of meeting, incredible frontline workers, courageous people who are saving lives, saving the lives of people in the most difficult circumstances. During my visit, they also taught me how to administer naloxone, a life-saving drug used to treat opioid overdoses. But more than that, they literally inspired me with their courage. Faced with a horrific crisis that seemed so difficult to solve, they didn't let anyone tell them that it can't be done. They just rolled up their sleeves, they went to work, and there's courageous people that are fighting on the front lines, saving people's lives. They have love and their courage, and because of their love and courage, there's people on the streets of Vancouver that are walking around that otherwise would not be. So let's give them a lot of love, all these frontline workers that are doing such tremendous work. They deserve our love, they deserve admiration. So I've been campaigning across our beautiful country. I've campaigned for the NDP across our country. And I can feel the awesome potential of our movement. They said to us before that the NDP, that New Democrats, would never do well in Quebec, and we swept the province. They said that we couldn't form government again here in BC, but after 16 long years, we proved them wrong and we did it. They tell us that we'll never form government at the federal level, but my friends, together, yes, we will. We will do it. My friends, it takes an act of love to realize that we are all in this together, and an act of courage to dream bigger, to demand better, and to fight for a just and inclusive world we know is possible, my friends. Together, with love and courage, we'll do it. Thank you. Merci. Thank you very much.
To watch more videos, please subscribe Wosm Entertainment and ring the bell for the notification.